Hello! Today we're looking at the passive voice. So we will start by looking at how you form the passive. I've put a document on StudIP with a table that you need to fill in before watching this video. Have a go first. Go on. You know, if you watch it without having a go first, you might think, yeah, see, I knew that. But if you do have a go first, then you can honestly say to yourself, okay, I did know that, I didn't know that. Okay? We'll also look very briefly at why we use the passive, and we'll look at some other passive forms, so to have something done or to get something done, and passive reporting structures. Right, let's start. Right, let's fill in this form which is on StudIP. Okay. As you can see, here you have to write down which tense and aspect we have. This is the active voice, passive voice, and the function. So, on the first line, bakers bake bread. Obviously, this is present simple. Obviously, bread is baked. Could have by bakers, but I'm not going to write that every time. Okay, the function of the present simple. So what we have here, this function is the same. Makes no difference whether it's active or passive. The basic function is the same, which is that it's always true, or that it's a routine. So bread is baked here every morning at 6 o'clock, or bakers bake bread here every morning at 6 o'clock, and that kind of thing. In order to keep this video short, I'm not going to talk to you about the function each time, because in your grammar book you can find the function under the active voice part, no matter which grammar book you use. If you have My Grammar Lab Advanced, it's page 360, I think. Any other grammar book also just has all the functions under active voice. Okay, line number 2, present continuous. Okay, we've got bread is being baked. Okay, so bakers, I'm just going to write BS. Little things, please, little minds. Bakers, obviously, are baking bread, etc. Line 3, present perfect. And we know this is for indefinite past time, giving news, recent events, etc. Okay. Active voice. Bakers have baked bread, and bread has been baked. Okay, the next line, the active voice is bakers have been baking bread, so you should know that this is the present perfect continuous, and we don't have a passive form for that. We can't say bread has been being baked. Okay? So in that kind of situation, we would just use the simple form. Next line. Let's see, for a completed past action. That should be enough of a clue for you to know that this is the past simple. So obviously bakers baked bread. So bread Let's see. Oh, by the way, if we look at the bottom, what basic rule can we use for forming the passive? Obviously, we use part of the verb to be. So, bread, see, it's a past simple version, so bread. If you say, bakers baked bread here yesterday, you could also say, I know, yesterday bread was baked here. Past continuous. Nope. Bakers were baking and bread was past continuous, alright, was being baked. Okay. The other thing about using the passive is, of course, that not only do we use the verb to be, but we also always use the past participle there. Let's see, bakers had baked bread, so let's see. Obviously, that's the past perfect. So, when we arrived at the bakery, bakers had baked bread. They had already done it. So it's one step before in the past. Before we arrived, which was also past. Okay, and so the passive form of the past perfect, so the past perfect passive would be bread had been baked. Obviously, that's the past perfect simple. Okay, that means down here we have the past perfect continuous. So instead of bakers had baked bread, we have bakers had been baking bread. So there we have a focus on the duration. Bakers had been baking bread for 5 hours by the time we arrived. And we don't have a passive form. We can't say bread had been being baking. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. If you look at this table, decide for yourself which other forms do you already feel comfortable with, and which of the forms do you need to get to know better? Let's put it that way. And remember, you also need to know all these functions to help you know how to use them. Right, that's this section. You probably already know some of the main reasons for using the passive, and if you don't, they'll be listed in your grammar book. Let's just talk about a couple of them. We might use it if we don't want to name someone directly. So we might say, oh no, look, this plate has been smashed. You might know that the person you're speaking to is the person who smashed it, but it's far too confrontational to say, oh no, you have smashed my plate. So instead we say, oh no, this plate has been smashed by someone, but we don't need to say by someone, obviously. So it can be intentional to avoid naming the agent, the person who did the action. We might use the passive if we don't know who the person was. So I might say, Yesterday, I felt like I was being followed on my way home. I don't know who or what was following me. Maybe it was a monster or a wolf, or who knows. I was being followed. I could say by someone or by something, but I don't need to say that. I could say, I sent a form to some authority and now it is being examined. So there's someone is looking at it in detail. It's being examined. I don't know who the agent is. I could say it's being examined by Frau Schmidt, but if I don't know who's examining the form I sent in, then I can't really say, can I? So there are lots of reasons like that. There's also another reason which is connected to something called end weight, which we'll be looking at in the next two videos. Okay, and that's a very important reason, but I'm going to keep it secret for now. Okay, right, let's look at other ways of forming the passive. Okay, let's look through the mime sentences I normally use in the class, okay? So this is just the normal type of passive using the verb to be. So someone can be measured for a jacket. This one's different, isn't it? To have something done. So she is going to have her hair cut. Sometimes in American English, this isn't in the passive form. I've heard many Americans ask, "Did you cut your hair?" when they actually mean, did someone else do it to you? In Britain, we wouldn't be able to do that because that would mean, did you cut your hair would mean, did you cut your own hair? Or did you cut your hair yourself? So we would have to say, did you have your hair cut? Or have you had your hair cut? And that's also possible in American English as well. Let's see. I was stung by a bee. That's okay. Another one with have. So I then had the bee sting removed. So someone did that to me. I'm going to have my eyes tested. Okay. So this is the other type of passive using have. Notice you could also use get. I'm going to get my eyes tested. And that's perfectly fine. But for the sake of this exam, we're not going to accept passives with get and got, simply because they are more spoken. They're not used, for example, with academic writing because we don't use the word get and got. And this grammar course is intended to support academic writing and your other university courses. And so therefore, please do not use get or got at all in your exam when it comes to the passives. Okay? So with those, you'd have to use have. Okay. So yet again, if someone else does it to you, then you can say this. Actually, I was watching an episode of Friends, an old episode of Friends, and it was an episode where Rachel's sister Jill took Rachel's baby Emma out for the day, and she came back and she'd put metal into the baby's ears, and Rachel asked something like, she said something like, "You pierced her ears," which of course that's the same kind of situation as with the haircut thing. That sounds like her sister did it herself, whereas I'm sure she would have taken her to a jeweler to do it. So we would say, you had her ears pierced by someone, right? So similarly, you would have your fingernails manicured, you would have a tooth removed. You would have your legs waxed. Okay, so these are all passive forms. Obviously, we can't say that you would be your legs waxed. That makes no sense. I suppose you'd have your shoes polished. Okay. Oh, and if you have my grammar lab, then this is the part about passives, of course. So I want to have a serious word with you for a moment about a popular fallacy or misunderstanding about the use of the passive. I believe that this is especially common in America, but Britain is not innocent in this either. There are some people, some old-fashioned grammarians, who believe that the passive should not be used all that often. There are people, especially with writing, there are people who think that the passive is not suitable for clear writing. People who think that when you use the passive, you can't see who does what, etc. Where did this begin? Well, I read an academic paper by a professor of linguistics in America who had done some research into this. I can't remember the exact details, but it seems that especially in America, they have style guides for writing. For example, the Chicago Manual of Style, etc., etc. And it seems that, I think it was in the 1920s, in one of these guides, I can't remember which one, someone wrote that you should avoid the passive and only use the active as much as possible, and that the passive was unclear, blah, blah, blah. And it seems that other people started to just copy this. It wasn't based in any kind of research. It was just one person's notion. They just wrote it down. And this has continued to our day, and you still find people who believe this. If you actually do a study of the use of the passive, it's used a lot, and it has numerous uses. So I don't want you to be anti the use of passive voice. It's very important. It's an essential part of the language. And it's also very common in academic writing. And I just want to talk to you now, rather than writing on the screen, about passive reporting structures. These are structures which start typically with the use of the word it. This is a dummy it. Dummy meaning that it doesn't actually have any meaning. It's just there as a placeholder. And you might say, for example, it can be suggested that. It is reported that. That kind of thing. And that kind of structure is very common. You'll also find more information about it in your grammar book. We'll be talking about the use of the dummy it in the next two videos as well. Anyway, but I just wanted to mention passive reporting structures at this stage. Okay, that's it for today. We have two more videos to come, and in those videos we're going to be looking at all the really interesting, exciting pieces of grammar, stuff which is probably new for most of you, and yeah, I'm excited. Okay, I hope you find it useful.